Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven. I've been working in PR throughout my long career, and I have a special interest in personal branding. It's what makes you stand out from everyone else who does the same thing you do, and it attracts people who need what you have to offer. I'm a keynote speaker, an author, and a columnist for the Forbes Agency Council and Main Biz. My audiences have said that helping them think about their superpower has changed the way they think about their careers and their lives. I hope you like this episode, and I hope you'll share it with other people who might be interested in hearing it. And with me today is today's guest, Delaney Vetter, who's a PR strategist and copywriter. Welcome to the PR Maven podcast, Delaney.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
It's so nice to have you too. And we haven't met yet in person, but thanks to the modern technology, we can connect here today.
I love it. It's great.
So Delaney Vetter is an independent consultant specializing in PR and copywriting for brands in the food and beverage and CPG space. She is the go-to for food brands' communication needs, whether it's pitching national press to help a brand get more visibility, curating in-person events and experiences to help clients connect with their community and with media, or honing in on their unique brand voice. She loves helping brands put the ideas in their mind into strategic, scrappy, creative action. Delaney has always been completely captivated by the food world since she was a kid, making her fluent in the language of cooking and eating. I like that too. This passion and skill set makes her a go-to for brands looking to reach a new audience of home cooks, snackers, and food lovers alike. When not working, Delaney can be found browsing the aisles of a specialty grocer in her Brooklyn neighborhood, or trying to convince her friends to try yet another new restaurant, or hunting for the best croissant in the city. So Delaney, tell us about your career and how you got into PR in the first place.
Yeah, well, thanks for the warm intro, Nancy. Yeah, so like you mentioned, I am an independent, freelance, self-employed, whatever word you want to use there, PR strategist and copywriter for primarily food and beverage CPG brands. And I have always been obsessed with food, loved writing, and didn't really know how I could fit in the food space. I knew that maybe the hours and workload of working in a restaurant weren't for me, but I knew I wanted to be involved in that world in some way. And when I was in college, I was studying communication. I was, working for our school paper, doing all the things to try to figure out what path I wanted to take, and ended up getting an internship at this PR and integrated marketing agency in Portland that worked with really major legacy brands in the natural food space. So Dave's Killer Bread, Bob's Red Mill, Kettle Brand Chip, all these brands that kind of led the way for the natural food movement and that kind of better for you space. And it was the best playground and learning experience. I got to work with these brands that were in my pantry and were really beloved, and then also because they did more than traditional PR, I also got to go to their content studio and help with recipe development and just really see like all the sides that come together to market a brand and to build brand awareness for a brand and newsletters and all those things. And that was great because part of my job was reading food magazines for work every morning, which is pretty ideal. It wasn't something I thought you could get paid for. Then the world of food media was more unlocked for me. And yeah, it was like, I really want to work with these brands. I want to be at the table with them when they're figuring out the big next steps on what flavors are trending and what do people want to cook at home now. And it kind of ended up being this perfect timing moment where I graduated college into the pandemic, actually, and thought I was going to go the traditional agency route because that was kind of what I was set up to do. And then, of course, if anyone who remembers back in spring 2020, no agencies were hiring then. Everyone was furloughed. The agency I interned at very sweetly was like, everyone on our team is furloughed right now, so we actually can't hire anyone new. And that ended up pushing me in a slightly different direction, which I don't think I would have pursued, which was freelance stuff. So yeah, someone who I worked with at the agency had a friend who needed some help on PR and copywriting right before I graduated. And it was framed to me as, it'll just be 5 hours a week, just helping out a little bit here and there. And at the time, I was 21 and was about to graduate college into this very uncertain time. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll give that a shot. That sounds fun. Fill my time a little bit. Gonna be at home in Utah and my friends, no one has jobs yet. It'll be great. And long story long, that kind of snowballed into getting referred to other clients. And then a couple months later, I had this full client roster that I built up somewhat by accident and then really decided I wanted to be more intentional about like the brands I worked with and go after those food brands and food and beverage brands that I really was passionate about. And yeah, so then I kind of took that turn and been doing that ever since.
That sounds like a great career story and a success story.
It's been mostly fun.
I love it. Yeah, mostly. Yeah, I know. I know. That's the way with my job. A lot of times people see me out, networking and socializing and traveling and having fun. And they're like, oh, your job must be just fun all the time. It's like, well, most of the time, but, like any job, there's stress and there's responsibilities and deadlines.
Yes, totally. Always pros and cons. But yeah, mostly, it's great. I get to work with really cool founders and talk about food and read about food and write about food every day. So can't complain too much about that.
Now, for those people who don't know the term CPG, do you want to define what that is?
Yeah. So CPG stands for consumer packaged goods. So essentially anything you would pick up in a grocery store or a Target in the food, wellness, home goods kind of space will be a CPG brand. And the kind of differentiation there is there are like food brands that might not be a CPG company because they might not sell to consumers. They might just be a beef supplier that has a really amazing product that might need PR, but they don't have a like direct to consumer channel or a retail channel. So yeah.
Okay. And you talked about founders. This podcast talks about PR and personal branding. Do you try to envelop the founder's brand into the brand of the products, or do you try to keep those separate? How does that work?
Yeah, it depends on the brand a lot. Some founders really want to be front facing, and for them, I can pitch them to go on podcasts like this and talk about their story, or to really just make their reason, like their founding story, a bigger part of our strategy. But some founders, they maybe are more reserved or shy and they just don't feel as comfortable in front of the camera or recording. And they would rather, if they have to send a quote, they'd rather write that out over email or just be more behind the scenes. And so I tend to work with brands that are founder facing because I think in this kind of climate for CPG, it helps a lot to have a really strong founder story. Not always. There's some brands I worked with that maybe their founder is no longer as involved in the day-to-day and they have a CEO that's more involved or a marketing director and they'll be more of the spokesperson. But any chance I can, I think people want to buy from people at the end of the day. And so you can have the best product and the best packaging and all those things, but people do like to know who's behind those brands a lot of the time, especially media. So it's something I always push for a little bit. Even my clients that don't want to do it, I'm like, hey, can we please do just one podcast? We'll prep a lot before. And whenever they do it, they end up doing great. So
yeah, I mean, really, when I think of the word brand, I do think of storytelling. And ultimately, I think that you want the customer to make that brand part of their story too. So if I love a certain brand or soda or whatever, or wine, we mentioned drinking. I think a lot of winemakers are very talented with making the brand story about them, but also, making the customer, making it their story as well. Mm-hmm. Is that something you've been doing?
Yeah. I mean, such a big part of my work. I mean, all my clients, so most of my clients are women-owned, emerging to mid-size brands. And for most of them, there's a little bit of product education that has to happen. So it's not as cut and dry as this is peanut butter and everyone knows what peanut butter is. So a lot of times that product education that I'm doing when I'm pitching or working with media is around how do you use this? How does this incorporate into other people's lives? And is this a way for people to come together for a dinner party? Is this a way to get your kids in the kitchen? Is this the best back to school snack? And so much of it is right. This is why the brand exists, but then also this is how it can fit into your life and how it can be, part of your pantry, part of your kitchen, part of your routine. And it's really important. Also, I mean, just from the brand side of things, you want people to have ideas of how to use that product and use it up so that they can go get more.
Right. And you also want to make them into brand ambassadors, right? So they tell all their friends.
Yeah. I mean, I do that all the time. I mean, my friends who don't work in food, brands that are not my clients, I'm like, oh, this is the best yogurt ever. You have to try it. And I mean, it's borderline annoying for them, I'm sure, because they're like, we know you like this yogurt. It's okay. But that's always the hope, is that people love the brand and love the product so much that they become that extra little piece of brand awareness, that they can go out, they can be the mini little publicists for the brand too.
Right, exactly. Brand ambassadors and, word of mouth marketing is the most powerful kind of marketing. So if somebody will recommend a brand to their friends and family, that has a lot more weight than an ad or even a story in a magazine.
Yeah. And especially generation wise too, I feel like my demographic, there are certain publications and things that people are reading, but a lot of people are getting their suggested products from friends or from TikTok or Instagram. And multiple times every month, I'll have a friend text me because they know I work in this space. What olive oil should I buy? Or do you have a recommendation on a good mascara? Because you have a lot of friends that do beauty PR. And I think that is what PR can do in a bigger way, is build the brand awareness with media. And then hopefully that can trickle down to the consumer level.
Well, we were introduced or referred by Kelsey Ogletree of Pitchcraft. And of course, Pitchcraft is the new sponsor of the PR Maven podcast. So I'm very excited about that. And like Kelsey, you are a strong believer in relationship building, and I am too. Can you tell us how that belief came about and how you view business relationship?
Yeah, well, I adore Kelsey, and I think she's such a great example of this because I met Kelsey in my first freelance job. She was someone that I had emailed with when I was working for this other person, and we stayed in touch over the years and have had a really great working relationship and friendship for four years now, I guess, or almost 4 years. And I think a lot of that is because there's not always an ask and it's not always business. We'll respond to each other's Instagram stories and about the cinnamon roll she's making and have just built that foundation. And I think of, especially with media, relationship building in the same way, where I genuinely love media and I love journalists, and I look at PR with a skeptical lens where I want to be really helpful to them. And I know that there are a lot of PR people out there and I don't think it's their fault. I think there's a lot of pressure and things that happen, but I think there are a lot of PR people and agencies out there that don't view that as a two-way street in the way that they should. And I really see it as I have two clients. I have the brand and I have the journalist, and my job is equally important to take care of both of them. And sometimes taking care of that media relationship might mean not pitching them a certain client story because it's going to impact that relationship in a way that is not beneficial to the brand or to me or to them. And so I think really just seeing them as people who are more like my colleagues versus people that I need to get something from or be more salesy with to try to get a client into a story. And so the best stories for me have come about from grabbing a coffee with an editor in the city or becoming kind of internet Instagram friends first and talking about recipes and things like that. And then them reaching out saying, hey, don't you work with this brand? I'm working on this story that I think would be great for them. And that is just such a way more rewarding anyway, but also I think just kind of brings the best work out from everybody.
I agree. Absolutely. You mentioned not always asking for something or not always be pitching. And, I've been working in PR for almost 4 decades now. It's hard for me to believe. And, I still have relationships with journalists that go way beyond just pitching them stories. I think if you build a relationship where you're truly friends, and I think the most important thing is that they know, like, and trust you. So if they know you and like you, they're going to want to spend more time with you or be more open to taking your calls or pitch your emails, whatever. But also that they trust that you're going to be telling them the truth and not just pitching something because you're getting paid by the client.
Yeah, exactly. Not just pitching what's convenient or putting spin on something. That's really not my style. And yeah, I just think seeing each other as people outside of the publicist journalist relationship so helpful. And
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think the biggest compliment you can ever get is a reporter saying, I love getting emails from you, because I don't think that's always the case.
So, yeah, it's important that journalists do trust the PR people they're working with. Is there an example? Do you have an example journalist that you have know, like, and trust relationship with?
That's a great question. Oh my gosh, I don't know which one to talk about. Yeah, I think actually, Kelsey's a great one. Kelsey doesn't write quite as much anymore, but she's one that I would say we can be really honest with each other about things for clients, and it can be very beneficial. But one that really comes to mind is Monica Watros. She is at Nosh now and is managing editor there. And her and I have been friends for years. And that really started because we would go to these trade shows together and get to like walk around the floor, and definitely see her as a friend first and editor second, which I think is really helpful. But she is the kind of person where we're at a point where I can say to her, hey, like this, I'm struggling with this thing with this client, and I just don't know like what to do about it. Or I thought they were going to get included in this story and they didn't. Do you have any feedback on why? And she's like, yep, totally can, like, here's the deal. And there's so many writers and editors like that. It's just so appreciated when they can kind of be unfiltered with you, because they know that you're not gonna, I mean, I always give my clients feedback, but I don't necessarily tell them exactly like this writer said that they hate this product. I might say that, but normally I'll be like, hey, a writer from this publication gave us this feedback, and I think it's important that we take a look at it. But this editor knows that I'm not going to take what they say and splash it all over somewhere or like repost it on my Instagram story or something. But yeah, I think, and also knowing that I can send an email to her, and there's other people too, that it doesn't have to always be this like perfectly curated pitch. It can be like, hey, I wanted to send this over really quick. Here are the details. Let me know if you want to know more. And I'm not worried that I just know that that's all they need. And then they will let me know if they need more. And so, yeah, I think just having like a really open communication and dialogue, I like really appreciate that. And people that, there was another writer I was messaging with on Instagram the other day, and I asked her a question about a different brand. I was like, hey, like, you don't have to tell me this, but can you tell me this little piece about this other brand? And she's like, yep, totally can do that. And then right after, she was like, hey, also, what do your clients think about getting coverage in this publication that I'm writing for? Is that something that's valuable to them still? Or is that something that they see as lower tier? And we were able to have this like really nice exchange of value and also just like supporting each other. And if an editor or a writer is like, hey, I really want to write for Good Housekeeping, or I really want to write for this, I want to be able to be like, oh, well, I know an editor there. Let me introduce you, because I think you'd be a great freelancer for them. And same thing, like they'll mention to me that a brand emailed them and needs PR, and would I be interested in talking to them? And so there's just so many levels of it where it's mutual and just so collaborative and lovely that it makes work better, I think.
One technique that I used at one point is a lot of writers need 3 examples. So they might not be focusing on just one brand. Mm-hmm. They might be writing about 3. I was in the ski resort promotion business. And so sometimes I would actually give a writer 2 other ski resorts that weren't necessarily like direct competitors, but that had something going on that tied in with whatever I was trying to promote, whether it was expanded lifts or expanded snowmaking or whatever. And I found that the journalists really appreciated that I was promoting brands that weren't necessarily my clients, but just trying to be helpful to them. So, yeah, I think you talked previously also about being helpful. And I've always thought like PR people should almost think of them as themselves as being of service to journalists. And if we are of service to them, they're going to appreciate that and again, want to take our calls and email.
Yeah, I tell clients all the time, we have to be bringing value to them all the time. And sometimes a friend will post on their Instagram story, I'm working on this story about pickles, right? I don't have any pickle clients, but I'm working in food all the time. So I know what brands are working on, and I know what's happening. And, whether it's friends, clients, or brand founder friends of mine, I'm always messaging like those things and being
right.
I just think first of all, it just feels like a friend thing to do. If your friend had a question on something, you would answer, even if it didn't directly help you, quote unquote. And yeah, I think that's something that's so helpful in pitching too, is to be able to, first of all, you get to highlight and support like other brands or maybe other publicists that would be a good fit too. but also you're just making that writer's life easier. And at the end of the day, I think that's what we should always be trying to do.
My mother-in-law taught me years ago. This doesn't have to do with any particular brand, but when you have a jar of pickles and you finish all the pickles, you should take a bag of baby carrots and just put the baby carrots in the pickled juice, and then you'll have pickled carrots. Yeah, I still do that.
Well, it's so funny because I think the thing now, it trended a few weeks ago because one of my clients is a tahini company, and it went viral on TikTok that people were using their leftover tahini brine and then adding, or leftover pickle brine and adding a jar of tahini and shaking it. And then it was this like tangy dressing sauce thing. So pickle brine. Yeah, I guess it's a super pantry ingredient.
Well, we're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back shortly. But first, I just want to mention our sponsor, Pitchcraft, another PR professional in the state of Maine, where I am. Her name is Elaine Terrio Courier. And do you know her? Do you know Elaine? Yeah, she's done a really great job with the Maine Crisps brand of crackers. And she's the one who referred me originally to Pitchcraft. And then I have a team of 6 people, and many of us are now members of Pitchcraft. And again, it's because I know, like, and trust Elaine. And when she referred Pitchcraft to me, I was like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And then, of course, I met Kelsey and Derek. And so that's how those relationships go.
Yeah, I met Elaine through Pitchcraft as well. And then it happened that when I love Maine Crisp also, but their booth, Expo East in the fall, was next to one of my clients' booths. And so it was really fun because she wasn't there, but I got to chat with her team and be like, I love your publicist. She's the best. She does the best work for you. But yeah, I think I love that. I love having the like great little trusted circle of PR friends and journalist friends, and it just makes.
Yeah, I mean, people who, when they say they will do something, you know they're going to do it. That's the basis of a trustworthy relationships. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we'll be right back in just a moment with more from Delaney Vetter after we hear a little more about Pitchcraft.
My name is Kelsey Ogletree.
I'm Derek Ogletree.
And we co-founded Pitchcraft to put the relationships back in public relations. I've been a journalist for about 10 years now and was laid off from my job as an editor in 2017. I decided to take the plunge into freelance writing, and really what I noticed starting in 2020 is that public relations professionals started scrambling to really figure out how to pitch stories to writers and editors during the pandemic. So that's when we really started developing the concept for Pitchcraft, which is a month-to-month membership platform really focused on helping public relations professionals build those relationships with independent journalists and editors. By joining Pitchcraft, you could save hours of research time week to week. You'll get the opportunity to personally get to know a new freelance writer every week, the opportunity to interface with editors and writers live in monthly pop-up discussions, the chance to build community with the rest of our members in weekly calls, access to e-commerce and affiliate resources, a master pitching calendar, and more. We'd love to show you how Pitchcraft can become an essential part of your PR toolkit. If you like the sound of that, book a demo with us today.
This episode is powered by Pitchcraft. Pitchcraft has been generous enough to share a discount code to share with you. If you use code PR Maven in all caps at checkout, you will get $200 off your first month. There is a link in the show notes. Welcome back, and today we're talking with Delaney Vetter on the PR Maven podcast. So Delaney, what is the best way a PR person to pitch a journalist? Can you give us like some real step-by-step instructions?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is research for this. I spend probably more time researching than I do sending the pitches sometimes, because the thing that's going to be the difference maker in sending a pitch that's actually going to get read, let alone potentially made into a story, is making sure it's for the right person at the right time and just like 100% a fit for them. And so many journalists get pitches that just aren't even in their beat or aren't even. I have food writer friends that get pitches for like toilet paper. They're like, I can't cover that. And that ends up kind of clogging up their inbox. And then they miss out on pitches that are actually a fit for them. So number one is doing a ton of research. Some things that I recommend is looking to see that they have active bylines at that publication in the last 3 months, usually even more frequently than that, especially if they're a freelance writer, but just making sure that they're actively writing and actively still covering those topics, not that they wrote a story about hot sauce 2 years ago and now you're going to pitch them hot sauce. So that's step one for me. And then step two, my approach to pitching, I want to make it as clear and simple as possible and also make it just easy for them to say yes. And that can be yes to a sample, that can be yes to an interview, and just making sure they have the info they need and not like a ton of extra stuff. So normally I go have my little intro and then I send bullets basically on the product or the brand, kind of depending on the angle of the pitch, and then always have a really clear call to action. I think something I hear all the time from writer friends is they'll get these pitches that are just info sent to them, but then no real like guidance on what is the next step. And so for me, that's normally, let me know if you're interested and would like to try a sample. We'd love to send you some, or let me know if you'd like to set up a time to chat with my client about XYZ, and just make it easy for them to say yes or no and send their address and get the samples, or just not make it this huge back and forth, because it'll make it easier for them and easier for you, because sometimes in those back and forths is when something can get lost in an inbox, and then all of a sudden that lead you had is like not responding anymore. So I think just being able to keep it really clear and succinct is great. I also, something that I always do is just make sure I have everything, even with all my clients, I have pretty much the first month of our contract is getting all of our ducks in a row. So making sure you have all of your assets handy, company bios, images, logos, like anything you would need, access to a sample, request form. So that way, because media moves really fast. So that way, if a writer says, oh, yes, I want to include this and I'm going to include it on Friday, I need images, I need links, I need whatever, you're not scrambling like I've definitely had to do before to get images from your client that isn't responding, or get an answer on something that you need yesterday. So I think that those are kind of the big things. Being really prepared, keeping it succinct and clear, having a clear call to action, and then just making sure that before you even send the pitch, you have everything ready so that you can be really quick to respond. And yeah, just make sure you don't miss out on things because a client was slow in getting back to you on something, or, you didn't have access to the folder with images or something.
Right. Something we do for clients is create a media room on their website, and that can have all of those kind of assets that the media needs. It makes it really easy, and you can have it be a login that you would give to the journalists, but still all the downloadable images, logos, PMS colors, whatever kind of information they might need. So
yeah, it's such a good idea, because there are so many of those things that an editor doesn't, or a writer, if they are on a deadline with their editor, they don't really have time to go back and forth with you. Also, a lot of times in my emails, I will include like a link to images, even if that way they can just see them and have them right away. Because yeah, it just makes it so much easier for them. And yeah, that should always be the goal.
Right. Yeah. Because isn't it horrible if like you land or you get interest from a really big publication and then the client can't provide what you need and you lose that opportunity?
Mm-hmm. I think we've all been there, and it's the worst. Yeah. I mean, I can share this example because it actually worked out just fine in the end. But one of my clients, we found out in December that they were going to be in the New York Times, which huge, like amazing. Everyone's excited about that. And they were getting some new images was the plan of this new flavor, but we hadn't been told when the story was going live. And then the first week of January, I got an email from the photo editor of the New York Times with like no ahead of time notice or anything, like, hey, story's going live next Monday. We need images. And
oh gosh,
I text my client like, hey, how did the photo shoot in December go? I'm sure you can assume the photo shoot in December did not end up happening, actually. So there were no images or no professional images of the product. I had 3 days to get images, and the photographer I had introed didn't end up working out. And so I ended up basically the day before I had to send all this stuff, coaching my client through how to take a photo of this product with like their iPhone in natural lighting, and then sending it to a photographer friend of mine to retouch last minute. And it was probably the most stressful 3 days of PR things I've had in a year. But that's such a great example of like, don't let that be you. Like, make sure before you send the pitch, you have them ready. So now I'm very, even if you tell me you're going to have the image, I'm going to wait until it's in my hand before I send that email.
Yeah, good. Preparation is key. So is there a book, a podcast, or a website that has helped you in your career, and why?
This is such a good question. I was thinking about this. I feel like early in my career, I listened to so many business style podcasts. And as I'm sure you know, like there's so many different kinds of advice. And a lot of times that advice I found for the more like business focused podcast didn't really apply to me, because what I wanted to build was so different. Like I didn't really want to build out a giant agency. And it just, sometimes I felt like I was getting all this input that was like distracting me from what actually made the most sense. And so for me, what I feel like I do the most now is I listen to a lot of like food focused podcasts that help like give me inspo for pitch ideas. Also, I just think it's fun because that's like my hobby too. But I love listening to Cherry Bomb Radio. And Cherry Bomb also has a podcast in their podcast network called The Future of Food Is You. That's all around young people in food and who are doing something really different, innovative. And I love listening to podcasts like that more these days than some of the more how to market kind of podcasts, I guess. And I'll every once in a while like listen to an episode about pitching or about PR, like from one of my PR friends too. But I find that I get so much inspiration for pitching ideas and for trends that I'm seeing, like listening to those things that maybe I wouldn't have thought of before. They might have a founder on for a brand that I've never heard of that might spark an idea for a trend pitch or just a different angle that I could use for one of my clients. And so I think that's been really helpful for me. I also really I love Muck Rack. I love like going and like reading the articles and like trend reports on Muck Rack and kind of seeing what they're noticing on there. And then also Substack. I read a lot of Substacks now. I love that platform. I think it's so exciting and fun. And I read a variety of ones on there, both from journalists and editors that are, calls for pitches or insights on industry stuff, as well as ones that are around food or trends or culture. And I think it all just helps, inspire and more creativity and all that good stuff. Yeah. What about you? What are you listening to or reading?
Oh gosh. Well, I try to listen to my own podcast.
Yeah, right. It's different when you're recording it, right? You can go back and listen to all these other things that you didn't hear the first time.
And then I do keep my hands in the ski world and tourism and outdoors. But
so fun.
Yeah. I do think it pays though to keep track of who's doing what and what is new.
Yeah. And sometimes you just get ideas that you wouldn't have thought about before, especially things that are outside the industry. I think that,
Right.
there's a couple newsletters I follow that are maybe more like fashion or beauty focused, but I'll notice something that they did on a campaign or for a media event that I'm like, oh, that would be actually really cool for one of my clients to do. And that's kind of nice sometimes too.
Well, how can people get in touch with you, Delaney? What's the best way?
Yes. Best way, my website is delaneyvetter.com. I have a contact form on there, or you can email me at hello@delaneyvetter.com. I also have an Instagram that I don't post on as much as I used to, but I post sometimes like fun client wins or events that I'm doing with them. Also, I post a lot of like trade show recaps of all the snacks I'm eating. So that tends to be a very popular one for people to follow along with. And that's Delaney Vetter, COMM. And yeah, but I'm always happy to chat PR things or media things. So I'd love to connect.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes. Come down to New York anytime. Or I need to come to Maine too. I do.
I was going to say, you'll have to go. There's a lot going on in Portland, Maine right now with food.
One of my favorite restaurants I've ever been to is in Portland, Maine. So 4th
Street?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I went there when I was touring colleges with my dad and remember being just blown away. I also went to college in Portland, Oregon. So I feel like I need to give Portland, the other Portland, more time.
Yeah, I heard you mention Portland, Oregon recently, and I assumed it was Portland, Oregon. When
Yes, both great food cities.
Yeah, they are really. Ironically, yeah, they are.
I love it. Yes.
Well, Delaney, thank you for your time today, and I look forward to staying in touch and having you be part of PR Maven Nation.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Nancy. This was so fun to chat.
Great. Have a great day.
You too.
This episode is powered by Pitchcraft. Pitchcraft has been generous enough to share a discount code to share with you. If you use code PRMAVEN in all caps at checkout, you will get $200 off your first month. There is a link in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the PR Maven podcast. I invite you to share a review of the podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation on Facebook. It's free to join, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you use an Alexa device, use your Alexa app to search the skills and games section to find and enable the PR Maven podcast flash briefing. This will give you access to exclusive content and more PR and marketing advice. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.